Hello and welcome to the first part of procedural stairs. To start with, we're going to create a curve. First, we need a geometry network or sublevel to create this curve. So now we have a curve node. So with this curve node, we can draw a curve in the viewport. Before we can do this, we need to also enable this handler. And now we should be able to then draw a curve like this. Now I want to have a little bit more structure in my curve. So I'm going to make sure it's a little bit aligned on the grid. So in here, I'm going to enable the snapping option for grid. You can also hold X to get the snapping options if you want to have a quick shortcut for this. So then I will be going from here to here, something like this. When you're happy with the curve, you're going to press enter. You can always start tweaking the curve where it goes afterwards. And if you want to add more points on the curve, you have to hold shift. And when you click holding shift, you can see that you can draw another line. So holding shift will make sure you can draw more lines. Now, as I want to create stairs, this needs to be higher. So we can decide the angle of the stairs. Then what we could do is we could resample the curve. So resample will create extra points on the curve. So right now we don't see anything because we have not enabled display points. So we can display the points and now we can see all the points that are being created. And then based on this number, it will create points. So the space between each point is 0.1. So if we increase this value, you can see that we increase the spacing. I don't need that many points, so I'm gonna use this value. So we have just a couple of points. And then what I would like to do is at the beginning and at the start, I want this to be sort of flat. So what I'm gonna do is I will ask the bounds from my curve. And then in the bounds, we're gonna play around with some of the padding options. So if you hold the middle mouse button, we can then, for example, as you can see, we can increase values. What I'm mainly interested in here is then lowering this value. So I'm going to take 0.2 and also here 0.2. So these are then the parts that will be moved. So then with a ray node, I'm actually going to fit the curve in the space. So in this ray node, what I'm going to do is here in method, I'm going to say minimum distance. So the points will go to the minimum distance of the second input. So and this will create then this shape where the end and the beginning is now flat. So even if I move my line, you can see it sort of keeps the end and the beginning flat. So this is the main idea of these nodes, is to create a flat beginning and a flat end. Now to clean up this shape a bit more, I'm going to use a group range. And in this group range, I will be selecting the first points. So first of all, I want to select points. So in here, I will go to type points. And we can select, for example, the start points and the end points, as you can see here. But actually I want to put them on 2 and 2. So these 2 points are the ones I actually would like to keep. So with a blast node, I will be deleting these points that are in this group. So we have cleaned up the shape a little bit to make sure that these and these are always perfectly straight connected to each other. Then I want to use the sweep node. And with the sweep node, we can then sweep a shape along this line. So we can use, for example, the built-in features like a tube or a square. You can see here. But I'm actually interested in using a custom shape. So I will leave it on second input. So I'm going to make a shape here as input, and I will be using a curve node here as well. So curve, then I will go in here to the front view. And I'm also going to enable grid snapping again, so I have some control in where to start with the lines. Something like this. And press enter. So I have this shape. We can also close it if you would like to close the shape. And I will also use a symmetry on the shape, so lapse symmetry. And I will be doing in this direction. And we can plug this in the shape here. And we should have then this result. So now it's actually facing in the wrong direction. And let's go here to the construction tab and then move the up vector to the y-axis, of course. So it's always facing in the y-axis. If you're not happy too much with the curve result, we can always adjust it afterwards with an edit node, and we can then tweak it a little bit. The shape isn't what you were looking for. Then we can tweak this shape a bit. What we could also, for example, do here is bevel a certain point. So we can use the poly bevel, and we can use the point feature. So we can go in here in points. Then we can select the points here. Let's say selecting these 3 points, then press enter. Now these points are selected, and then we can start beveling them, as you can see. And then we can do something like this. Make them nice and round. Then I can go here and then press 2 and go in point selection. Then we could select these points. And we could, for example, scale them a bit inwards. Like this. To get some more variation. So notice that there is a small issue here. But don't worry too much about that. Then one more thing I would like to do here as well is to remove the line in the middle. Either we can use here the dissolve flatten edges, which should get rid of the middle line. So when we copy the shape now, there is no line in the middle here as well. So then we have this shape for our stairs. And I think it should actually be more like this. And maybe these should be higher. So we can easily tweak some of these values, and later on I will add a small procedural system here that controls some of these points, so we can also tweak some of the width and the height of these. Then here it might be useful if there is actually a little bevel on these points. So we can also here put a bevel on the points. Make sure you set it to points, and we don't necessarily have to select points. It should work automatically, as you could see. It works automatically without having any specific selections. So it would round off these parts. Then we can put this in here. Then it will have some better transition if you were looking for this. You might have some issues here. So you could solve this by just, for example, placing a transform here and then moving your shape up or down, and then you can see it's getting better. That's a quick fix for that issue. So then we have this base setup. Also in the sweep, we can also generate UVs. So if you click compute UVs, you have then automatically created UVs for this geometry. Later on I will talk more about UVing and how we could use a trim sheet to use procedural unwrapping on it. But for now, I'm going to focus on the geometry. I would like to close off these endings. So we can go in here in the sweep and then end caps, for example. Like we can do a single polygon. So that is possible. Can also do something like this. So it's a grid shape and it would try to reconstruct it further. So there are multiple options here to close this gap. But I will actually do another option, because later on when I build my procedural UV system, it will come in better. So I will use a polyfill, and in this polyfill I will set it here as filling mode single polygon, so it only fills single polygons where it needs to be. And I would like to save this information in the group. Then this group can then be used in the bevel, so I can use the poly bevel here again, and I can fill in the patch group. So if you would now increase then the distance, we can see now that we can bevel this part specifically. So then we have a better transition to the ending. So this is then already the first system. We can build in some more tweaks if you want to. Like in here, we could create a system that creates more spacing on these parts. So I will be using a range node again. And we're gonna select the beginning and the end of the points. So beginning and end. So we have selected them. You can also invert it if you want to. So begin and end points. Then in a transform, I will be using this information, but I also want to make sure the pivot of my transform is sort of in the middle. If you have been following other tutorials about the sci-fi series, you might know this part. So I've built in a node called center, and in here we filled in this piece of code to make sure our pivot is always in the center. So if you use this information, it will automatically store the pivot in the middle. So of course, this is for the x-axis. Then for the y-axis, we have then y. And then for the z-axis, we have then z. So if you fill this in, you have then the correct pivot in the middle. So as you can see, pivot is now in the middle of the line. So we can fill in then my beginning and end group. So if I would change the scale here, we can play around with this scale. We can also in here press an exclamation mark and it will reverse the group instead of changing the slope part. It will scale up these parts. So based on what you would like to have, we can then tweak that. So I can fill this in here and use this further here. So we can have a more beginning and an end. Then the next part, I will be creating some of the stair steps. So we'll first be modeling them. And I will also use a curve and the sweep nodes. So first of all, curve node. I will go to the top view and let's draw a curve. So it could look something like this. Then also again, I want to symmetrize this on the other side. Then we could also do a bevel. So you can bevel the points and we can, so the transition will be less harsh when we sweep a shape on this. So like I mentioned, I want to sweep a shape on this. And I'm gonna build a custom shape. So curve node again. And I will go back here in then a front view. And let's draw a shape. So in my case, it's also automatically closed. Doesn't have to be the same. I might change it afterwards. So I'm gonna place this in the sweep, and then we have a result automatically. And again, we have to go here to construction and set this to the y-axis. So we can see that it swept around. I might place a transform here, so we can tweak the position. So after a couple of tweaks, I ended up with this shape. So what I did is I placed an edit here and I fine-tuned the shape a bit more. So we have more spacing in the middle here, and these side ones are smaller. Then also here in the bevel, I beveled these two edges, not this middle one, just because it gave me a better result. So this is then the result I end up with as one of my steps for the stairs. So then I'm going to calculate how many of them I want. So I go back here to my base line, and I'm going to convert this line. And what this is doing is it will convert each line into a primitive. So if you look here, we have one primitive 0. If we convert the line, that means we will have now 3 primitives. So each line between points is now its own primitive. So the primitive I'm actually interested in is called number 1. So we can then use a blast node. We can then fill in group 1 and then revert non-selected. So we have this line. Then what we have to do is resample the line. So we'll create points for us to copy on the model, and I'm going to tweak the resampling amount. So we have enough points, but not too much. And then we can use a copy to points. And let's see how that is doing. So copy to points. So now we have created these stairs then. What's also interesting to know is that in Houdini 18 there is also a copy to curves. So if you have a much more complex curve as input, you might need to use the copy to curves. And also in the copy to curves we can set the up vector to then the y-axis. And how it perfectly follows the curve. So if you were looking for this result, this works way better on curves. So I can definitely recommend this node if you want to copy models on curves. But as we are creating a simple stairs, the copy to points will also do a nice job of just copying this on the curve. So then we can already start merging these results. And now we have our base setup. So it definitely would need some more tweaks. And I will just use a transform. So we can move this forward. So we can move this piece forward. Then let's scale it for now. So then quickly testing the tool. So if I adjust my line, so we can easily see that it adjusts automatically to where I would like to have my stairs. So the system is also built for now for one line. So we could draw more lines, but as you can see, it's not really working with multiple lines. It's specifically built now for this one line to have a simple stairs we can quickly build around the level. Then next part, I'm gonna build a handle for the stairs. And I'm gonna create some more space in here because we also want to have information from the curve. Then I actually want to start from this blast node here, from this straight line. And I want to sweep from this. And I want to use a line as input. And I want to adjust this line. And I want to adjust the line like this. And I want to axis align this. So it's in the middle. And then also here, I'm going to place a transform. And the transform will come in handy if I, for example, want to move it up higher or want to adjust the position where it is. So we can easily, with a transform, fine-tune where I should have my handle. Also with this line, we then control the length. So later on, we will have a global length parameter. So we can decide the length of the total stairs. So now I'm going to eyeball the length. And I think it should be around here. So it's around here on the side. And then I'm going to use an add node. And in this add node, I will be deleting all geometry but keep the points. So now if I enable the points, you should clearly see we have now the 4 points. And if you go to polygon, we can connect these 4 points based on the group here. So now it's just going to connect them based on the numbers. So from 0 to 1, from 1 to 2 and to 3. But I want to go with, for example, we can use groups of endpoints. So we'll connect 0 to 1 and from 2 to 3 and so on. But we can also then use the skip one and then able to skip. So it goes from 0 to 2 instead of 0 to 1. And this is then actually the result that I want to. Because this result I can now use an extrude node on. And instead of using the default extrusion options, I'm gonna use the front transform. So I enable this. And then I can drag this. So I have now created the sidebars for where I want my handle. Then this result, I'm gonna use the convert line here again. And with this convert line, I'm gonna delete some of the primitives. So 0 and 2 needs to be deleted. So blast. So 0 and space 2. So these are now deleted. Then we could already start sweeping this result. So if you use the sweep node, and let's use the round tube, sweep the result as you can see. There's also one problem here is that these parts are not connected anymore, as you can see. So we need to convert these back to one primitive again. So we can use a polypad. And this node will convert everything back to one primitive, as you can see. So we went from multiple primitives to with the polypad with one primitive. So now this should be connected here again. Then to make this a bit more nicer, you're gonna of course bevel these points. So we have a nice round edge there. So make sure it's set to points and then increase. So now we have this nice round handle. So maybe 8 was too much. And we can also play around here with the topology on how much you would like to spend on this edge. So maybe a bit more here. And then merge this here and let's see if this is placed well. And it is definitely placed on the correct position, but maybe the size of it needs to be tweaked. So here in the extrude, I can decide how high it should be. So if you want to have just a low handle, you can place it here. And if you want to then tweak the radius, we can go back here in the sweep node and then start making it a little bit thinner. So it fits a bit better with the scale. So now we have a handle. So if people need to grab the handle, you can have that also. So that was it for the first part. We made a procedural system for the stairs. And now we can draw our own stairs. So next part will be creating a digital asset. So we can then use these stairs in Game Engine.